Ayin Beis, Volume 1, conclusion of Padu V'Shalom, Discourse 29, we're on page Reish Chafei 225, chapter 116. So after eight chapters discussing Yaakov's journey, and more specifically his building of the raising of the stone, turning it into a monument, a pillar, matzeva, shaman, anointing it with oil. So, this all came as a discussion to explain the third interpretation of Sfira, which is Even Sapir. So to remind ourselves again, three meanings in Sfira. Sfira is the interface, the key building blocks of existence that God uses to interface between the divine and the existential, our existence. These spheres originate in the earliest source in the 10 hidden spheres, which were discussed at length much earlier in the Hemshech. 10 hidden spheres is essentially how the infinite artist, who has infinite possibilities, arose in his will, shir atzmei b'keach, he estimated in his potential, and he allocated, so to speak, and determined to emanate 10 spheres. So that's the 10 hidden spheres. Then came the great Tzimtzum. Well, I should add that the 10 hidden spheres have Eris and Kalim, even though they're not yet energies and containers, but the 10 spheres are both in the energy level and the container level. Then came the great Tzimtzum that concealed and began the process of the Kav, which has these 10 hidden spheres in there, embedded somewhere in a very amorphous way, traveling. The Kalim begin to develop, and finally in Atzilus, they all come together. So they're now solid Kalim, containers, identities called Chesed, Gvura, and you have Eris that when they manifest in the containers also take on personality of Chesed and Gvura. So on their own, the Eir is not completely seamless. The Eir also has it, but it emerges in the containers. So that's how the structure of existence begins to take hold. Finally, after Atzilus comes a parsa, a curtain, many more diminishments, until we finally have a world like ours that is essentially the 10 spheres that manifest with a physical body. So we see only the body, we don't really see the force within it. And the mission, the goal is to reveal it all. Starting from the bottom up, start revealing what is the divine force within existence. So each part of existence has in its spheres, which is really the 10 Asara Mamoris. The Asara Mamoris are more the diminished energy as it's creating. And our goal is to reach back. So Yaakov's Aveda is exactly that. He's taking a world that is fragmented, many stones, many letters that evolve. The letters are the letters that create, the Mokar Hayesh, as he puts it, and to connect them together, they become one stone. That's Allah. Then comes Amshacha, that God tells him, I will protect you, I'll be with you, and you'll be able to draw down all these energies, all these levels down to earth, Adom Azais. Then comes, after he wakes up, he takes the stone, next step, and he raises it upright. So instead of it being in a state of a fallen state, he's lifting Malchus, which is concealed. And Malchus has all these letters in it. Remember, this one stone encompasses the whole picture of existence. He lifts it up, the Matzeva. So Malchus, as it manifests in Biyah, and from there to Malchus and Atzilus, and then the Malchus Atzilus to Tiferes, which is like the moon and the sun. So now we have a unity going on, a total unity. And then we learn finally that Malchus to Chochmah, because Even Sapir, the same stone, remember, he's now turning into a stone that is a luminous stone, and Even Sapir, Even is Malchus, and Sapir is Chochmah. So it's Malchus connecting to Chochmah. So essentially, in language of Kabbalah, the unity that you create in a fragmented world, and you're connected to the source, is essentially the Aliyas HaMalchus, HaKomas HaMalchus, first Malchus to Atzilus, Malchus to Tiferes, Yichud Zun, Kutchabricha V'Shchinta, is another way to put it. The Yichud of Malchus to Chochmah, which brings the Bittel. Chochmah, remember, is also the Shaman. And all the way up, to be able to achieve this, So then so one second. So he lifts up the stone, and then comes another hamshach vayitzik alo Hashem, and he pours the oil on it. Oil is from Chachma. Before he said oil was from the Gimel Rishenus of Atik. So really, it's all these levels. So the shemen, it's not a contradiction. It depends on what level you're speaking. So what did he say here? Peseches yedecha, the high yichud of Chachmi la Chachmi tata. He said v'yitzal shemen. Where did he say the shemen is what? Shemen. Earlier, he said this earlier. Okay. He said it again here. I just want to see what he said. Here we go. That's that interpretation. But in order to achieve all of this, you need to have Yaakov, because his root, the Tiferes, goes all the way to Pnimius HaKeser. So Pnimius HaKeser is what gives the power to pierce Yibaka, to pierce all this darkness, and to achieve all this. But the process is an orderly process. So essentially what Yaakov is doing, he's taking avonim, material stones, letters, turning them into, you could think of it, turning them into spheres, all the way to Evan Sapir, they become transparent channels, not just to the Eir HaGvul, Esses Spheres Agnuzis, but all the way to the spheres that are the Enkets, even higher than the hidden spheres, all the way to the root. So let me just elaborate on that a moment. If you remember, we discussed at length. Basically, Malchus and Atzilus is the microcosm, as it elevates, is a microcosm for Malchus of Ein Sof. Remember when we spoke in Baruch Shamar, we spoke Adenu Zenu, so he said all these things, all these 5 levels that start Lifnei Tzimtzum also exist in Malchus. So basically, the same idea that I just described, how Malchus goes to Atzilus, and from that to Tiferes, to Chachma, all the way to Pnimius HaKeser. Pnimius HaKeser is the equivalent Lifnei Tzimtzum of Bligvul. Chachma is already the beginning of spheres. Malchus is the end of the spheres. Malchus ends with the Bechina Achrena. So essentially, what Yaakov is really doing, he's connecting Gvul to Bligvul. That's what it comes down to. So there's, as I said, there's always 4 levels in a sense. There's how it's all concealed. That's in our existence. There's how you reveal the divine force, but it's still a Gvul. There's how the Gvul reveals the Bligvul. That's coming from a place that's beyond the Gvul. And then there's, of course, the source, Atzmus, that's beyond the Bligvul too. So that's really that's the 4 steps that we're describing here, just to make it palatable. I want to add one more thing in this context. If you remember, just to connect a lot of things together, I don't know if you thought about this, but I was going back 2 things. A few chapters back, when he spoke about what the Nekuda is in Aveda, if you remember, he said Nekuda Samalchus, as it goes into Biyah, he spoke about it in several ways. One way was, it's the Nefesh Alekis, when it's forcing the Nefesh Habamis to do something, because it doesn't have anything but faith. So it's just a Nekuda. I'm looking at chapter Kuf Yud. B'chinas Katnus. A second thing he said, Gam Yashlem is Slapshasayos Amalchus Keich Apel Benifel. That's a Helen Vehester, where a person, for example, is completely involved in materialism. And Esther, remember the difference between Esther and Rachel. That it's hasted. The Malchus is concealed. What's the Nekuda there? The Nekuda there is Hamshachas Aras Mamayla La'ir Saratzen. Yarav Orav Ruch Mamarim. That chapter Kuf Yud. In chapter Kuf Yud Aleph, he said, what's the Malchus as it goes below? Is Golus. Right? Malchus in Golus is Nephilas. Sukkos Davin Nephilas. The people of Lefnei Raglov. Okay? And in Zman HaBayis, you have the revelation. In Zman HaGolus, it's concealed. And Hashem Semech Neiflim, through mitzvahs and through tshuva, you get to Nekudas HaMalchus. So here's the key line. So I was wondering, he already said that the Nekuda itself is there, even it goes down below. So what's Yaakov's role? So if you look at the beginning of Kuf Yud Beis, look at the top of Reish Tazayin. There's an Omnam. Omnam, Yaakov Hikim B'chinas HaMalchus. Yeah, chapter Kuf Yud Beis, line 1. See, Kuf Yud Beis. Omnam, Yaakov, after this. So clearly, in other words, let's put it in Aveda cases. An neshama in this world has a pintele. The spark is there. Even before Yaakov comes and elevates it, the spark is there. And you'll have, you say, there's tshuva from time to time, and you have nothing is lost, but it's in deep darkness. It's Golus. So there's the Nekuda of Malchus exists. In addition, you remember we discussed this. If you remember chapters back when he spoke about Adenu Zenu, the Pu'ula of Makifim on us, we also have Makifim affect us. Remember the Makif of Ak is the Mesiris Nefesh, the Makif of Tiri Law is Mesiris Nefesh of the Guf, the Makif of Atzilus awakens Tshuva in us. If you remember. And each of the Makifim affect Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. I'm going back now all the way to... So the question is, so if you look at the whole picture, so in other words, we have both the spark is here, the Evan is here. You also have the effect of Makifim. So that's premium. I would say the Evan is Malchus, it's as it manifests. So it's the effect of, in other words, yeah, right, exactly, yeah. Chapter Samach, right? Yeah, those chapters, the whole Arich is there.
Last line.
Yeah. Yeah, but all these chapters, it speaks about all the Makifim, all these chapters. So the question then is, so what does Yaakov do? So that's the Omnam. Yaakov comes, and it's not enough. Then basically we're dependent on that even though God created a Tzimtzum, and all the concealments, and your animal soul dominates, then the spark is alive. But this is not bringing a Geula. This is not bringing a revelation. Because that would be a question. Someone say, what's that from Hamad Rebbe? What do you need a Rebbe? What do you need anything, frankly? You have the spark is here somewhere. From time to time, it'll waken up. You're not at the end, there's going to be an awakening, you know. The answer is, that comes Aveda. So that's how Yaakov comes Aveda now. Now that there is an Akuda within us. Remember, the interface has to be that it doesn't just come miraculously. If we didn't have the Nakuda, you could ask the other way around. What do you need the Nakuda for? Yaakov is lifting us up. Because you need to have it embedded in existence, even in the darkest place. You have the effect of the Malchus, even as it's hidden, there's still something there. We have the effect of the Makifim, which wake us up in different ways, like, let's say Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or the other different things we learned. And then comes a Yaakov, and he comes into the picture, and he gives the Keyach, like the beginning of the Yichud, Tamat and Teirah, the beginning of the unity, Tamat and Teirah, he gives the power to now elevate it all. Not it should stay. And that's why you need a power outside of existence, a bligvuldik power to come in, pierce the reality. Because the Nekuda doesn't pierce. The Nekuda says, even though you're in Golus, even though you're asleep, there's something there. He comes and pierces and gets Malchus energized. Malchus is just a very, very, in other words, it's like a Rebbe. He comes and wakes up the spark inside that is there, hidden anyway. He gets it, he fans the flame begins to rise, Malchus elevates to Atzilus, and Atzilus, Malchus connects with Tiferes, full moon, like Zman Habayis, Shlema Melech, then connects to Chochmah, the Bittul, and all the way to Primis HaKesed. Basically, the Sfiris, which were all concealed in the number, not only telling a story, but they also become an Evan Saper, a transparent channel, all the way back. And this is all alluded to in the story of him taking the stone, standing it upright, pouring the oil on it. That's process. This gives us the power, then comes to Matan Teirah to achieve the same thing, to elevate the world and to draw down the divine. So it's Halah and Hamshach, as he's emphasizing a lot in the last chapter. It's an elevation, and then it's a transmission downward. I'm just trying to bring together all the chapters in a context here. So basically the whole summary of the last, I would say, 115 chapters is the structure of existence, how it elevates to beyond structure.
Continues to loss.
But there's so many points here, you see there's components.
Beyond Matan Torah, isn't it the loss of love?
No, that of course that's the preparation, the loss of love, where the whole, right, then the whole fusion takes place. Loss of love is the ultimate Yiyah. Yiyah l'beis alikim, right. That's the Evan Azez. Yiyah will be Beis Elikim, the Yudke, the two level Malchus will be like on the level of Chachma. So to just decipher and demystify, when you speak Malchus elevation to Teferes, to Chachma, in simple English means you're talking about the how do you take a fragmented world or something that's concealed and connected to the higher unity. That's really what it comes down to. But the Rebbe Rashab is explaining it on all levels here. So on the microcosmic level, it's an Atzilus, and the macrocosmic level is before the Tzimtzum, how the 10 hidden spheres reveal the Bligvul that put them in place. Because they were all envisioned by a Bligvuldik artist who had many possibilities, and he just chose these 10 spheres. And now he's bringing it all back together in this chapter 116. Okay. So page Rev Shchafei 225 Kiftazan V'hinei Mechol Anal Move and the Mashakelim Niklas Viris will be Hiris. One more thing before I go further. And Lavan wants to intensify the concealment. So that's an additional reason that you need Yaakov. Because even though the Nekuda, meaning the spark, is there always, but when you have Lavans around, and Esavs, and Pares, and so on, obviously they're all interested, there's a war. It's not just neutral. They're intending to cover it up. So as he said before, in the end of the chapter, that Yaakov was also countering Hepech Pulus Lavish Asagal. He wants the Levushim to conceal. Now we learn like a mound that's considered to be the Parsi. He wants it to conceal, that it shouldn't let the bittul of Atzilus to affect Biyah. So by my yesh doesn't want. That's what he says. You don't come here, I don't go to you. We learned this before. And additionally, remember the whole beginning of Evan Sapir. Remember he said when he started Evan Sapir, I think, let me just refer back before I start further here, when he starts the third interpretation of Evan Sapir, before the Sol Arichas with Yaakov, is chapter Kuvdal, page Reish. So he says, Apirish Agimul is Evan Sapir. So he says, what's Evan Sapir? He says, who made al Behiris? V'zel Lechalik B'chlal Ben Akelim Levushim. The whole Arichas is all explaining that first line. That Evan Sapir is brilliance. It means transparent. It lets the light completely through. Transparency. Shakelim Enim Astirim Aleir. Levushim, on the other hand, conceal. But levushim of Gedusha are good concealers. For example, when you wear shoes, when you wear garments, it protects you from the cold, protects you from the ground, it protects you from other people. So on its own, it has a value. But, like he said, before Chet Tzadas, they didn't need it, because they didn't have an outside world to contend with. Levushim, in other words, are concealers for good purpose. But they can end up being, if they come too thick, they can ultimately, after Ishtalshlus, they can become complete concealers, and they completely conceal the divine. Kalim never conceal. Kalim remain Kedusha all the way, even down Natzilus, as down Nasir rather, always remains Kedusha. So basically, Lovan is the representative of Levushim, Yaakov is representative of Kalim. What's Kalim now? We're saying that the Kalim are now becoming Evan Sapir, and that's where he's going back now to Tazayin, after that whole Arichas. Actually, the Yaakov started not in page Reish. I'm sorry, the chapter, page, what did I just say? Yeah. There was a few chapters about Keichos and Levushim, and Yaakov's Pasha started Kuv Zayin, chapter Kuv Zayin, the bottom of page Reish, 205. Okay. So now we go back. From all the above, we understand that when we say that the Kalim are called Sfirus Bihirus, meaning Sfira from the word brightness. That's the inner dimension of the containers. That reveal the energy as it is. Because the outer dimension of containers, even though they reveal the Erel Commission is Bar Leil Pei Kufhei, like we learned before Pei Kufhei, chapter 105. Yeah. That the Kol Inyan HaKelim Hu Legales, that the whole idea of Kelim is to reveal. That's what a Keli is. Remember, we learned about the faculties. As opposed to, for example, my garment, my jacket, it's not a revealer, it's a concealer. Yeah, I could tell, you could say you're wearing a certain garment, you want to express something. But it's essentially, it's a concealer. My hand, on the other hand, or my faculty to write, is a revealer. It doesn't necessarily reveal everything, but its purpose is revealing a faculty that is concealed in the nefesh. So, kelim b'chala to reveal. Dal shem zeh nikre gufim. That's why they're called bodies. They're called a guf. Like you said then, that both the guf to the neshama, the guf is a revealer of the soul, and the keiches and the organs of the body, the faculties are a revealer of the soul's faculties. Not like the garments whose role is to conceal. But in contrast to that, the containers are to reveal. Nevertheless, the way they reveal, the way they reveal is through concealing on the atzmus primis ha'er, on the core and inner dimension of the energy. He said that also back there, if you remember. He said, they reveal through concealing.
What reveals?
The kelim.
It was quite different than the Levushim.
Levushim only conceal. Levushim don't reveal anything.
Well, I'm sure the Dibur Meisa.
If you had gloves.
So he said there, the Machshav Dibur Meisa, back in chapter 105, are still concealers.
If somebody's wearing gloves, that also reveals the shape of the hand. There's nothing else.
It doesn't completely conceal the shape of the hand, what you want to say. It doesn't reveal the shape of the hand. If you don't wear the glove, you'll see the shape better. You're saying it's because the garments don't have to completely conceal. But fundamentally, why are you wearing a glove? Because you want to protect the hand from cold. You're not wearing a glove for, I'm not talking about ornamental reasons. He said, kishutim, ornaments is a different thing.
Don't leave any fingerprints.
Right. Today I see gloves have also for texting. They have now the tips of the gloves are for texting. Look, there's two sides to it. Compared to Levushim, Kelim are revealers. Compared to Eris, they're concealers, they reveal. So yes, if you go a step further, Machshava Dibur Meisa, healthy ones, are revealing what's in the faculties. But Machshava Dibur Meisa, compared to, let's say, Seichel itself, is a concealer. So it's a relative thing. See, Machshava Dibur Meisa, look, the goal is that the revelation should come even through the Levushim. But Levushim on their own, potentially, you start adding up Machshava Dibur Meisa, you have talk radio. That's a major concealer. If you want to understand, that's the point. Obviously, Machshava Dibur Meisa of a tzaddik is also revealing. But he's talking about the personality of the levush.
You said the more levushim you add, obviously the more conceal going to be.
Yeah, for sure.
The more kelim you add, lavdavka is going to conceal more.
Correct.
That's also another.
Yeah, there's a way to put it that way. Look, the kelim, if to remember, let's just go back to who we are as human beings. 2-3 things are going on. You have your soul, you have your body and your organs and limbs, and you have the garments you wear. Let's just talk physically. They're not on the same level. Obviously, the soul is energy. That's Eir. Your body and your faculties, your hands, are the Eir's way of expressing themselves. So, of course, your fingers do not reveal all the depth of your wisdom when you start writing, etc. Let's not even talk Ma'aseh Machshavim. Let's just talk about the Keiches. So you have the brain, the physical brain, is the place where the mind resides. You have the vision. Your eyes are where your vision resides. Now, if you put on glasses or sunglasses, or you put on any garments, now you're talking already a level that is beginning to be a real concealer. A newborn child doesn't need garments. Adam and Chava didn't need it, because if you're living in a non-hostile world, or in a world that does not need protection, that you don't need protection, garments are unnecessary. So garments essentially are external force. Remember, he says they're detached and they're concealers, which is interdependent. That's why they're detached. Whereas, so here you have, that's what you have. So the same thing is in Pasuk Eliyah, what he says. Remember, the Lashon was like this. He said in Pasuk Eliyah, he started like this. He said, Antu dafikus eser tikunim v'kedin lon eser sfirin. What's tikunim? So that's levushim, but those are levushim. That's like kelim. Call them the 10 spheres. Then he goes a little further. What did we say later in Pasuk Eliyah? He continued in chapter Kuvav on page Reishei 205. He said that's what he says afterwards. But afterwards you say lekam levushin tikinuslon. What's levushin tikinus? Because now the soul, the energies, has what he just said. Tikunim, we call them spheres. That's kelim. Then he put levushim on them, which is machshava dibra ma'aseh and aveda part. But that's essentially that's the whole story of Ishtalshalos. Remember, let's put it down in spheres. Esser spheres of Atzilus are Eris and Kelim. So where are the Levushim? Remember we learned about Chashmal and Sandal. These are the angels. They're called. What? Malchus has. What do you say? Kiyofa pamayach. Kiyofa. Pam. Huh? What's the line? Huh? Not manava. Kiyofa pamayach nalai.
No, not Malay.
No, there is now there. Wait a second. Forget the lashon there. But anyway, the bottom line is that now is Malchus to be able to influence Atzilus and needs to go through a parsa. A curtain is already a levush. See, the ten hidden spheres, remember we spoke, even Malchus of Atzilus, without any curtains, will not be able to enter into Biyah and create. So what's the example for it? So a teacher is taking his idea, is putting it into words. Fine. Words are kelim. Asis are avonim, kelim. Now comes, he needs to have an example. He needs to have a metaphor. He needs a riddle. So what's he doing? He's taking his letters and he's disorganizing them. So that's already called level of a curtain. Because you're doing something additional. Not just you're transmitting ideas through words, you're making the words into a riddle. So it's concealing it more. And that's where the parsha and so on. So that's where you have the levushim. And Yaakov's work is in Atzilus and Kalim. He wants to create the Kalim. And Lavan wants to intensify the garments. So here it says like this. So bottom line, what he's coming now back to, was Primus HaKelim mentioned in this whole discussion here? I know it's mentioned far earlier, but is it mentioned in this discussion here?
We once had it, because I remember...
No, we had it a few times.
We had it, because Dr. Lang asked...
Yeah.
Remember he said?
Yeah.
That the primus is to pour out on the others to hold it.
Yeah.
Can you just... No, we did earlier for sure. I wanted to just know in the last pages. No, we had it for sure earlier. The whole discussion. He had a whole discussion about it.
Or that comes in. That's all. But it's not that relevant.
Well, here it's very relevant because you see, if you recall, I believe I don't know if he spells it out, but I believe the three meanings of sfira. You could say number misper is chitzenis hakelim. Story sipur is emtsoyis hakelim, the middle of the keli. And sapir is the primis hakeli. That's what's very apparent for what it goes on. In other words, there are three dimensions in how bottom line it comes down to how manifest is the gvul, or how much emphasis is on the energy. So even in kelim itself, remember the interface has to be as perfect as possible. So you just don't have the eir is the divine and the kelim are the identity of existence. Even the identity of existence becomes more and more refined as you travel from the outer container to the inner container. I mean, we spoke about it in many ways. For example, even machshava dibra maisa, when you speak something, an idea, so you can, like for example, you could be focusing on the letters, but then you can be focusing, you could be reading the page, remember I mentioned, and you don't even notice they're letters, you're just getting the idea. So there the kelim are becoming very almost translucent, or transparent for that matter. And just letting the flow, but there are kelim there are letters. If I put an idea on paper without letters, you're not going to understand it. So there are letters, but you're so immersed in it, you don't even notice the letters, you only notice the energy, so to speak. And we brought the din from Shabbos, that a keli could be a shear, you're not allowed to carry it, but if the eichel, the food inside the keli, that the keli is less than a shear, on Shabbos, al pi Torah, there's no isser hatzah. You do not, it's not considered carrying. Why? Because the container's only purpose is to carry the food, and the food is only a small little quality. The container doesn't. You don't measure it by the container. You measure it by what its purpose is. It's just an example. Okay. The way they reveal is still in a form of through concealing on the core and the inner energy. Like we learned earlier, that chapter means chapter 105, about the words of speech, the letters of speech, that conceal on the core energy, and through that they reveal. So there we learned that about levushim, dibur. She says, Similarly is also the containers. A lot of things to connect here. Ooh.
How is Machshava a concealer? Machshava.
Well, Machshava compared to Seichel is a concealer,
Right.
not compared to...
Like a filter, in other words.
Yeah, because a Seichel is like you have a million ideas in your head. Machshava is the one thought you're thinking.
Yeah.
That's the reason. Yeah.
That's exactly what I thought. I'm starting to think like you.
This is Chassidus. I mean, it's explaining it. Yeah, good. That's a good sign. I started thinking like the Rebbe, so we're going in a good place.
Wow. I'm starting to feel like Moshe.
Okay.
For the way on,
Okay, so 7 billion more to go. 7 billion to go. 6.9999 billion to go. So it's a good beginning. All great things begin in one spot. So that totally makes sense. And that is when we say that through the containers the spheres are drawn down, the energy is drawn down in a progressive, orderly fashion, the ishtalshlus of the cosmic order, that the energy diminishes. So very basic level. It's simply that's the process. If, for example, our faculties, which are, in this case, the kelim, like our arms, our legs, our heart, our mind, our eyes and ears, were not diminishing it, the intensity of the soul's energy would never be able to really manifest. So what the eye does is revealing, but it's also regulating. It's a filter. It is a filter at the end of the day. However, it's what he called an attached levush. It's an attached filter, meaning it's a revealer, not quite like the garments. He's explaining basically that in kelim itself there are levels, obviously. However, this is the outer containers. However, by contrast, inner containers, in truth, reveal the energy, the way it is. Like by Torah. What does Torah do? Remember, in the last chapter we spoke about the difference in Asara Mamoris and Asara Hadibris. So we said Asara Mamoris is Milan de Adyeta. That's essentially what we call common language. And in there, godliness is concealed. Now it's creating, of course. Here is a big power. But compared to what the artist has within, it's a very minimal flow. What's Torah? Torah gives you a lot more of what God's thinking. He gives you His plan, the purpose, etc. So Torah tells you essentially what the real deeper meaning of it all this is. So he's saying the same thing here in Kelim. Which we said earlier. What was V'yitzek Shemen? Remember, Tefillah was raising it up. Torah was drawing it down. Torah brings down the Mahuz V'etzem Ha'er, the inner personality and core of the energy, brings it down into all the levels, till even Malchus and in Mata V'Biyah, all the way into Biyah. Shuzeh Masher Himshich Yaakov, this is what Yaakov drew down, B'chinas Hamshachas Ha'atzmus. He drew down the core of Atzmus, the etzem of divine, to the point that there should be no concealment at all.
So you drew down the Atzmus. I thought the Atzmus is built in Mispashek.
I don't think he means the Atzmus all the way that Atzmus. Yeah. In other words, it's, as opposed to the energy that's in Seder Shtalshus, that's diminishing. Yeah. Look, you have to always think of it, if you want to really give examples in personal life, you have to remember like this. When a person is healthy, there's a certain natural flow. Right? The blood is, thank God, circulating. The other systems are working. The breathing is smooth. I'm just giving you eris and kalim. And the kalim are regulating. So your mouth takes in air, sucks in air, goes into your lungs this. Oxygen is absorbed, then exhales, exactly. Same thing with the blood. Food does its thing. So there's a system. If God forbid something breaks down, what happens? So the body is built in that it's going to start bringing more energy to try to fight an infection. Well, let's say you're running. You're running, so your heart's going to start beating more because you need more blood to sustain the energy. So that all is an example of a hamshacha that you're bringing from a deeper place that you don't usually need. So, in that sense, I'm saying that's when you say atzmis compared to. So there's the flow, that's the regular flow. Then the times you need to have an extra surge. That extra surge you have to dig deeper. Yeah, or Yaakov when he does his Aveda, Primus HaKesed, or a person Tshuva. When a person is Yadim Yosher Helech, he doesn't need that amount of intensity. I'm just saying that's what he means in Shachas Atzmis. So you need to have something from the core. So it obviously means Atzmus Ha'er. There's another shayla, what does it mean Atzmus will be in Tachtenim? Isn't Atzmus in Tachtenim now? If Etzim built the Mispashas, what's the Uftu in Atzmus itself, once there'll be a Dirah B'Tachtenim? There your question would be a legitimate one. But that's going to have different discussions. That's more, the type of Atzmus will be fulfilled, and it's the Gili of Atzmus. And Gili is also the gay in Etzim. Even though Etzim built him his Pasha, built him his Gala, still he wants to have a Gili of. So that's another discussion. But basically, okay. So this is what Yaakov is doing. That's what Yaakov is mamshich. How is that possible? The outer container, so here's a good example. When you're running and your heart is starting to beat, what's happening? I don't know. Definitely there's an expansion going on. Your pnimis hakelim are coming into play. Because till now, chitzenis hakelim are enough, because the flow flowed into your containers. But now you need to draw out more energy. So now that's what he's saying here. This hamshacha that you're drawing now, an extra surge, is the pnimis esespheres, not the chitzenis of the spheres. Remember when we talk about the chitzenis esespheres with Tiferes, he said the chitzenis esespheres. Right. Where was it? Chitzenis esespheres and pnimis esespheres. It was in chapter Kuf Yudalet, I think, 114. Do you remember that discussion? Yeah, here. Yeah. When we spoke about Malchus, Malchus says the 5 lower levels in Malchus are the Chitzenius. Remember he said, what does it mean lower spheres? He means the outer dimension. And then there's the inner dimension. Also Kesed has these 2 halves. Remember Teshai, we said Yoshes. The Teferes also, Kesed also has the 2. There's the outer and there's the inner. So when you want to have the moon on its own, is getting it diminished. The 5 lower parts of the lower spheres of Malchus, or the outer moon, goes through great day. It goes through. Sometimes it's radiates, sometimes it doesn't. But when you want to surge from Pnimius, the Pnimius brings the energy into this. So when you have this extra dimension, it's Pnimius Esespheres, which of course is leading to Pnimius Kalim. That's what he's saying. Dafka commotion is barley al pedicud gal being yakavam. So yeah, it's mamish kivanti. Like we learned earlier, chapter 114, being yakavam tzoy ubechinas yichud pnimi dava. The kavam tzoy. Remember, we said 2 things at the middle kav, the middle crossbar achieves. 1, it goes all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. And number 2, it doesn't diminish. It's the same personality of the flow. So exactly. So Pnimi, so then also Yichud Pnimi of Ava. Remember he spoke the Yichud Pnimi of Abba and Ima is what creates, is the beginning of, what did he say? Of Yichud Shimsha V'Shira, of the unity of the sun and the moon. So that's the Pnimi. So that's and this, therefore, is through the Pnimis HaKelim. So now the Pnimis HaKelim are coming into play. That are not a separate personality of the energy. Let's just elaborate a moment. What he's really saying is the following. Why don't you just argue? I'll put it in a question form. Make an argument. You know what? The regular flow of the cosmic order is energies get diminished. The Kelim help diminish them. And the flow continues downwards until it gets to very to levels like our own levels. And then when you start climbing the ladder, what you're doing is you bring a bigger flow of energy. But the kelim are the same containers. Why can't we just say that way? Because the interface won't be complete. He wants to have that. In other words, let's put it in blunter terms. A teacher is teaching an idea to a whole bunch of students. They're student to student to student, lower, lower, and lower. So he has to diminish the flow. Student teaches to the next level. So there's a teacher to student, that student becomes a teacher to a lower student. Let's just say a whole bunch of levels. Now, the last student is beginning to understand more. So the student above him, the teacher, begins to give more. So you could just say that the more energy going on? No. The keli of the student is also expanding. So now, not just till now, you're accessing his container, his outer container. Now his inner container becomes more receptive. So he's able to receive the energy. So it's not just you're flowing. In other words, for example, in pipes, the pipe is getting a small flow of water. You put more water, fine, but then the pipes are not expanding. It's the same pipe that was there yesterday. Here, you're not talking about that. Here, you're actually accessing, and what's coming into play is an inner dimension of the pipe, so to speak, that actually expands the container, that makes it far more transparent to receive the air. So it's not just a static container energy thing. The containers themselves have these dimensions. He's not elaborating here a lot, but that's clearly to understand, and you need to say something of that nature, something like that. Which is, of course, leading us to the real different meanings of sphira. That's really, really, really going. So it's not just a more flow of energy. Yeah, that's very good. So in a way, if you think about it from a model for education, when you're teaching a student, besides the fact you're giving him tools to grow, and the Maimer 29, the summary of the Friedrich Rebbe was Sfiras Even Sapir Primis Hakelim, which is actually the Teichen of the end of the Maimer. And we finished here, so we did today page 225, 226, and we shall resume next class, Discourse 30, Chanukah. My Chanukah, Shabbos Pashim Mekevitz, Shabbos Chanukah. So we're living with the times. It's 100 years ago exactly. And so we'll stop here.